All right. So as you consider your questions, and before we get to the ones that were asked during the lecture, let me just read you this quote, and then I think it'll provoke some interesting thought. Today, there is not, and there cannot be any separation between ecclesiastical affairs and politics. Politics pretends to universality. In other words, it wishes to take into its hands the resolution of questions concerning spiritual life also. This means that political actions cannot be indifferent for the church as well. Furthermore, when Antichrist shall have power on the earth, he will naturally be a political figure. This means that the church will have to oppose his political persecution. And so as even now, to weaken this opposition, his forerunners, taking advantage of the idea that the church should be above politics, conceal their warfare against God under a political cloak. The martyrs are political criminals. To be sure, the church should not intrigue, but as soon as politics touches on questions of spiritual life, the church cannot close her eyes to this. And it is one of the things that I think is dominating our life today as well. I mean, the contemporary socialist, communists, antichrists, nihilists are just a continuation. I mean, there's similar spirit to the Bolsheviks. That's why this class is so relevant. And their tactics and their approach is not that different. We hear this today from Orthodox Christians. I had actually an Orthodox Christian, well-meaning, from Australia write me again and again over a month and a half, about 10 months ago or 8 months ago, and was upset with me because I was, quote, involved in politics. And and I explained to him more or less what I just read without really realizing that he had said this, Andreev, that this whole COVID phenomenon, this whole manufactured crisis, and this is very interesting, by the way, if you're following the news, people like Rand Paul and others have been somewhat successful. God has allowed for the very true, very, very real possibility, and that's what I think from the beginning. This is what a lot of us thought, that this was concocted in a lab, this COVID virus, and it was actually, I remember very early, my a spiritual father in Mount Athos said to me, "The Americans are behind it." I said, "That's interesting." People in conservative circles, traditional circles here in Greece, don't like America very much, but that's another story. I mean, America meaning the American political system and the American elite and all the rest. But and now it's coming out that actually, yeah, we were funding this research, this gain of function research, and now it's coming out that it's very likely that it was concocted. There's a lot of evidence, and so everybody's should be eating their words and crying mea culpa, but they're not, because they're not honorable people in politics and in the media. But so anyway, from the beginning of this thing, you can see the deceptive nature of it and the political involvement. And this is just a health issue. Yeah. Or don't get involved in politics. But see, politics is getting involved in the first things. It's getting involved in the ultimate things. It's getting involved in the nature of persons. It's getting involved in church life. It's getting involved in church freedom. It's getting involved in these issues. You can't not be involved in some way or another. Otherwise, the church's voice is just relegated to spiritual life. And that really means indifference to truth. in the public square and in our life generally. So I think it's a great quote. It's an important quote. Of course, this points to not only, first and foremost, it points to what's going on in the 20s, how they're accusing all of these all these martyrs. They were accused of political aspirations, political revolution against the system, and they were martyred or exiled on that basis, right? So that's because they resisted. We'll get into this a couple of weeks. Sergius and his declaration. And many people don't get this. They don't get the deception and the nature of the thing. But we'll try to get there and get into that. And so first and foremost, it's referring to the machinations of the Bolsheviks. But then it's interesting, in the diaspora, after the Russians came out, you can see this debate going on between them and the Russians who came out in the 20s and 30s. Well, there were those who came out as well at that time who were more of the, what do you call it? I hate these labels, but you got to say something. Liberal side of things, maybe. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was a debate going on basically between, let's say, Jordanville and the more, traditional / conservative side, and then those who were, I hate these labels, but for lack of better terms, just so we're talking about the more liberal or, Parisian school, as people coming from that school, and they were saying, well, why does it have to be the Romanov dynasty? Why do we have to return to the Romanov dynasty? Others were saying, well, no, we need to return to the Romanov dynasty. There was this debate going on. But the underlying current was, should the church get involved in questions of the Tsar and governance in Russia, and what is the proper governance and all the rest? Or should the church just operate in the sphere of liberal, with the classical sense of the term, liberal governance and all the rest? And I think it's connected. It's connected. And then today we have the debate going on between, I guess one of the things he was criticizing me was, well, you're a priest, you shouldn't be talking about these things. You shouldn't do a video on who to vote for, or how to decide who to vote for, as I did back in November, right on the eve of the election, which I got a lot of grief over, right? Yeah. There's certain things that people don't want to see priests talking about. Voting and who to vote for and all the rest is one of them. And there is a legitimate, there's always something legitimate, right? In these criticisms, there is this legitimate aspect of it. And that is that there is a temptation for the church to depart from its mission, its spiritual / salvific mission in the world, and get enmeshed in things which are possible to be done by others who are not, who do not have this clear-cut mission, and therefore they might do well in that sphere, politics, moral issues, I don't know, whatever it is that's necessary for humankind to exist and to thrive. But in doing so, they're leaving the higher mission, which nobody else can do, and that's a legitimate thing. There is a lack of discernment, and the West has got very enmeshed in all that, and it's true. And if the ultimate things are solved and the questions are answered, and the deeper questions of man's salvation, but also just the anthropology, cosmology, all these things that are really basic, if these aren't answered, our origins and all these things which only the church can answer ultimately, well, solving all these secondary things is not going to do anything, right? And this is also the temptation of bringing everything down to the social level, the canonical, the communal, the human level only. And this is very much a part of the spirit of the world. And this is the spirit of the renovationists that we're going to talk about, is they want to make the church a servant of the world. And this is very alive right now in the Orthodox Church, among the ecumenists and the modernists and the secularists and all the people who are in apostasy essentially from the gospel and from the church, who are leading, or in time leaders in the Orthodox Church. There's a segment of these people who want the church to be basically more or less really concerned about security, peace and security, right? And we remember what the Apostle Paul said: when they clamor for peace and security, then the end will come. Then the destruction is imminent, and that's referring to the end times and the Antichrist. And he will bring. Humanity's main concern will, and the Antichrist, the spirit of Antichrist, and the workers of Antichrist will do everything possible to create a fervor in the human person in the community, to clamor for and be desperate for peace and security, exactly because they want their Savior to bring that, right? So that will be the focus, and there will be a church, quote unquote, that will be a part and parcel of that, will be involved in that, perhaps even leading humanity to those concerns. And so salvation will become a salvation not from death and sin, but from the ills of death and sin on this earth, which are ultimately temporary, right? And they're going to accuse the church of indifference and lack of love because we're not, first and foremost, so the Bolsheviks do it, and the whole renovations thing, that was exactly, that's why it's a type of the end times, because that's exactly what was going on then. And you'll see this with the renovationists. You'll see this spirit, and there are plenty of renovationists in the church today. Anyway, I'm getting off topic, but it's interesting, this whole question of what should the church do with politics when politics gets involved in things of the church and tries to dominate and pervert and distort the church and enter into the life of the church. Like, you can't commune with one spoon, or you can't be in the same place if you don't social distance. You can't be there if you don't put masks on, and all the rest. And you've got to contact tracing. Aren't these exactly the invasion of the state into the realm of the church? And so therefore, if you say, well, we're not going to get involved, we're not going to get involved in politics because, we're in the spiritual realm. That's another error. You see, there's two extremes. Church stays in its ivory tower and becomes indifferent to things that are actually of great concern to the church because politics is somehow involved, or political institutions, the state is involved, or the church actually makes these things and the world's peace and security the ultimate aim of the church. So there's two extremes. You see this is present throughout the 20th century and in the renovationists and in our life in the church today. You see this going on. Yeah. So Ephrosinis, that's the dilemma that we're talking about. Is that we're about the kingdom, and yet to get to the kingdom, the enemy's doing everything possible to throw all kinds of things in our way. And so indifference to those that struggle would be indifference to the brother's salvation. So it's a question of discernment. The truth of and the wisdom and the discernment of the church coming into the public square, as it were, actually is a salvific act, and it brings people to the truth, which sets them free. So you can't, my experience is, you got to love truth first and foremost, of course, as a person, but also as an idea. You can't be indifferent to the realm of ideas and truth, right? Because it reflects on and points to the ultimate truth, the person, the incarnate truth. You've got to come down. You've got to love both, and if you do, you'll still shine among those who don't know the person of Christ, but they're looking for him and they're clinging to every aspect of truth they can find. But because they're still in the rationalistic approach to things, they're looking at truth only on the rational level. So the trick is, or the struggle for the church is, how to witness in that realm and yet bring people out of that strictly rationalistic realm, right? We don't become irrational as Orthodox Christians. We become super rational. But we still have to witness and operate within the rational realm of ideas as it pertains to truth. And Father Seraphim Rose was doing this all the time, right? I mean, he was witness to the truth in questions of evolution. He was witness to the truth in questions of ecumenism. I mean, he was writing on all kinds of issues surrounding the militant church, the church which is en via, right, on the way still, right? So you might say, well, he was a monk in the mountains of California. I know there are monks who are, and this is the norm, right? The monks are in their cell with their prayer open. They're not engaged in the world. He was a unique person, a unique monk, a unique Orthodox Christian, because he engaged. And